Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Week 2 of college football season reminded us why this sport is just so unpredictable. On paper, it looked like a quiet weekend, but instead we were gifted with nonstop action. From noon to midnight, we had close finishes, overtime thrillers, and high-scoring shootouts. Saturdays are just different this time of year, and man, do I love it. We had Alabama stealing headlines with a dramatic turnaround. After they played their worst game in nearly 2 decades, they bounced back with near perfection in Week 2. Arch Manning also re-entered the spotlight. He struggled against Ohio State Week 1, but responded with 4 touchdowns and added another on the ground against San Jose State. Iowa State beat Iowa 16-13 on a last-minute 54-yard field goal, which was an exact repeat of last year's ending, only just a different score. Baylor had a double overtime shootout win 48-45 against SMU. John Mateer led Oklahoma to a victory against Michigan. And Florida lost on a walk-off field goal by kicker Nico Gramatica, former NFL kicker Martin Gramatica's son. The bottom line, nothing about 2025 has followed the script so far. Just a quick recap of what I do every week. I break down college football matchups by comparing the Vegas betting lines against the average, or the mean ratings of over 24 computer models. This spot's where the numbers don't quite match up. Basically, Vegas sets a spread, and these models give their own projected line. And the difference between these two is what we call the discrepancy. These discrepancies can show us where one side might be undervalued or overvalued. I'll walk you through some of the biggest gaps and highlight games where the models indicate there are edges to be found. That gives you a sense of where the market and analytics disagree heading into Week 3, and will help you with your betting. So let's jump into the results from last week. Here are last week's results, and just remember that the line and model average columns denote that the away team is favored if there's a negative next to the name. And in the discrepancy win-loss column, it's the way you would have bet, which side of it you would have taken according to the numbers. I had a fairly successful week last week playing some of the edges. Kent State covered the 48.5 on Texas Tech by half a point, but hey, it counts. Troy covered against Clemson, and at one point were up 16-0 in that game before losing 33-16. And Washington State beat SDSU handily to cover. Marshall was the only outright loss I took on betting the discrepancies. I actually ended up laying off the Auburn-Ball State game. I thought on the eye test Auburn would beat the spread, but the model was correct in predicting Ball State to cover the 42.5. That game ended 42-3, but still I would have been wrong. Not about Ball State being bad, just about Auburn covering. Auburn is factored into the biggest discrepancies again this week, so let's dive into our top 5 biggest discrepancy games, starting with the Tigers. As I mentioned, the Auburn Tigers are off to a strong 2-0 start after that dominant 42-3 win over Ball State. Auburn has been powered by a rushing attack averaging over 265 yards per game, and a defense that's held opponents to just 13.5 points per outing. Auburn comes in as heavy 24.5-point favorites, but while their defense has been stout against the run, the secondary has shown some vulnerability, giving up 245 yards per game through the air. On the other side, South Alabama enters at 1-1 after a tough 33-31 loss to Tulane. The Jaguars are putting up 34.5 points a game and have been effective on the ground with nearly 200 rushing yards per contest. However, their defense has struggled, especially against the run, surrendering over 200 yards a game. While Auburn has the firepower to control this matchup, with Jackson Arnold at QB and Jeremiah Cobb leading the rushing, South Alabama's offense could keep things interesting. The discrepancy favors South Alabama in a 6.5 positive point direction, and the fact that South Alabama just played a very good Tulane team as tight as they did is why this week the betting lean is towards the Jaguars to cover the 24.5-point spread. The Liberty Flames traveled to Bowling Green this Saturday as 6.5-point favorites, looking to bounce back after a tough 34-24 loss to Jacksonville State. Liberty has shown plenty of offensive firepower, averaging over 530 yards in their last outing, and with a balanced ground attack and 5 passing touchdowns on the season. However, their defense has struggled badly against the run, surrendering more than 260 rushing yards per game. However, their pass defense ranks among the best in the nation. On the flip side, Bowling Green is also 1-1 after falling 34-20 to Cincinnati. The Falcons' defense has been tough against the run, holding opponents under 83 yards per game, but their secondary has been under scrutiny, giving up over 225 yards through the air. Offensively, Bowling Green averages 23 points per game with a fairly balanced attack, but they'll need more consistency to keep up with Liberty's pace. The models actually have them as a 0.2 favorite, essentially a pick'em game, and with a 6.5-point discrepancy, I'm willing to make a small unit bet that Bowling Green is able to stay within the margins and cover. The Utah Utes head into Week 3 with momentum, sitting at 2-0 after a dominant 63-9 win over Cal Poly. Their offense has been explosive, racking up over 1,000 yards already, with a ground game averaging nearly 280 yards per contest and 9 rushing touchdowns. Add in 5 passing scores and an average of 53 points per game, and it's clear this is one of the hottest attacks in the country, with Devin Dampier under center. On the other side of the ball, the Utes have been just as sharp, holding opponents to under 10 points per game and less than 75 rushing yards per outing. This is a balanced, efficient team that has yet to make a costly mistake. Wyoming also comes in undefeated at 2-0, fresh off a 31-7 win against Northern Iowa. The Cowboys' offense is steady but not flashy, averaging just over 400 yards and 20 points per game. With a solid run-pass balance, where they've really impressed is on defense, allowing just 3.5 points per game, third best in the nation, and keeping opponents under 200 total yards. With 3 interceptions and no passing touchdowns allowed so far, Wyoming looks like a disciplined, stingy unit. The odds makers have Utah as a big favorite at 23.5, but with Wyoming's defense, the smart play may be to ride the Cowboys to cover the spread. Appalachian State heads to Hattiesburg this weekend to face Southern Mississippi in a Sun Belt clash, and both teams come in with very different vibes. The Mountaineers opened the year strong with a dominant win over Charlotte, but last week they stumbled against FCS Lindenwood, barely escaping with a 20-13 victory. And that's thanks to Rashad Dubinion's 194 rushing yards and a stout defense that forced 2 interceptions. Still, turnovers, penalties, and poor time of possession left plenty of question marks for the Mountaineers. Southern Miss, meanwhile, is trending upward. After falling to Mississippi State in their opener, the Golden Eagles bounced back with a 38-20 win over Jackson State, where quarterback Braylon Braxton threw 3 touchdowns and the defense snagged 2 picks. Odds makers have Southern Miss a slim 1.5-point favorite, but I've seen it go the other way on some books as well, with App State favored. This Appalachian State team is still figuring out its identity, and the sharper play looks like backing the Golden Eagles at home, especially with the discrepancy favoring them. Missouri heads into Week 3 red hot at 2-0, fresh off a 42-31 win over Kansas, where their offense racked up nearly 600 yards, with 334 yards and 3 touchdowns by standout QB Bo Pribula. The Tigers are averaging over 50 points per game with a balanced attack that's pounding defenses for more than 240 yards on the ground and over 330 through the air. Their defense has been solid too, holding opponents under 20 points a game, and they enter this matchup as heavy 27.5-point favorites. Louisiana, meanwhile, sits at 1-1 after cruising past McNeese State, thanks to a ground game that piled up over 300 rushing yards. The Raging Cajuns also play tough defense, allowing just 12 points per contest, but stepping up against an SEC powerhouse like Missouri is a different challenge. Odds makers like the Tigers big here. With their explosive offense, it's easy to see why, but I see overinflation reflected in the numbers. The models shave off a touchdown towards Louisiana, and if we're going with the models, and with the Tigers' chance to cover only at 38.9%, I think Louisiana plays well enough here to cover, if just barely. Here are a few of the other games to keep an eye on this week. Wisconsin-Alabama has the Tide as big favorites, but the models trim that down a bit, so that's one to watch. Jacksonville State-Georgia Southern could be tighter than the spread suggests. I'm really high on this Jacksonville State team this year in games like this. Texas State-Arizona State might not be as big a blowout as Vegas expects. And Duke at Tulane is one of the flip spots, so that'll be a fun one to watch. Oregon State-Texas Tech looks closer on the numbers than the odds makers have it, but Texas Tech has been scoring at will in both games so far. So there are definitely some interesting storylines outside of the biggest mismatches. Again, guys, I'm a new channel, so as always, I'm open to suggestions. If you guys have any questions or want any data for any specific game, I have it for every D1 game. Let me know in the comments, and I'm more than willing to do a specific rundown for a particular matchup that could be tailored for you or give you data points that you need to make smarter, informed decisions. Thanks again for stopping by. Please like and subscribe if you found this useful, and so you don't miss next week's breakdowns. As always, have a safe and healthy weekend while you're watching college football and the NFL, and happy bet. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.